Assalamu alaikum. My name is Syed Mehran Ali and my other group member is Muhammad Saham Ismail. We are going to discuss a chapter from the book The Social Work Treatment, and the chapter name is An Interlocking Perspective for Treatment. The- this chapter is written by Francis J. Turner and it is the 29th chapter number 29 in the book. First of all, I am gonna do an overview about this chapter. Once again, we have reached the termination of our voyage, during which we visited 27 models of social work theory, each of which is important for contemporary practice. And as on 3 previous occasions, I need to step back and ask, what have we learned from this venture? Unlike what I had expected when this process first began some 25 years ago, the emergence of new theories of practice has not diminished. Then we had 14 systems, now we have 27. Some disagree this, but I welcome it. For this expansion of diversity reminds us once again how complex is our field as we practice in a highly diverse and ever-changing multicultural world. This reality also reminds us how we were when we attempted to include the scope of social work into any single theoretical framework. In addition, this development has helped us become more open to new ideas, concepts, strategies, methodologies, techniques, and technologies, all of which have enriched our practice. Nor has there been any movement toward the emergence of Omega theory, which would begin to tie together this wealth of concepts and practices. Although the development of the fourth force in theory development, as discussed by Dr. Cowley in chapter 28, speculates on this possibility, there is now much less criticism about new theories than before, although still a tendency in some to be fashionable. There is as well a growing tolerance of difference among theorists and theorists. There is more acceptance of the idea that a great satisfying is not going to emerge, nor will a major theoretical breakthrough occur that will make everything clear and precise. This awareness has in turn made us more humble, critical, outward looking, and curious about both the processes of building theory and the use of theories as they emerge. As well, there is a growing interest and comfort in comparing notes between theories and examining their conceptual basis, not in an argumentative, self-validating way, but in an exploratory manner, seeking a broadening of purview. In doing so, however, there is still a tendency in our profession to prefer the new to the old, even though, as the authors of these so-called traditional theories demonstrate in their respective chapters. There is still much to be learned from them. The chapters on functional, psychosocial, and problem-solving theories are good examples attesting to this. Our growing comfort with the need to be multi-theoretical continues. This is accompanied by the understanding that systems are helped, not threatened. Not threatened. When they seek and incorporate interconnections with other systems, the holy wars of earlier years have all but disappeared as the awareness grows that each system has something to teach us. The belief that a strong theory base enhances practice is evident but not universal. Thus, there exists an equally strong awareness of our challenge to demonstrate this. With this growing comfort in looking over one another's theoretical shoulder in a collegial manner comes an appreciation of the need to look not only at differences among theories but also similarities. Throughout, there is an understanding that within the differences there is a common thread, or indeed common threads that unify each even if adapted from other sources and other disciplines. Then social work is indeed a social work theory in that being adapted to our needs, each addresses that person in situation reality which is the cornerstone of the profession. In this win, all of the chapters in this volume were written by social workers, each of whom has examined the tenets of a particular system and demonstrated its relevance and utility to social work practice. Now, what is new? But much of what has just been said was identified in third edition of this volume. Have there been observable changes in our addressing theoretical plurality? Certainly, the fact that in the 10 years since the last edition we have added 6 new theories marks the march to increasing complexity. Further, however, one of the challenges facing anyone interested is the therapeutic application of our theoretical plurality is how to find a way to compare theories that appear to be so divergent. If we really wish to implement an interlocking perspective, we need to find a way that helps us see where theories are similar and where they are different. This is something with which I have long struggled, and in so doing, I have formulated a series of conclusions. It is clear that each system influencing contemporary social work practice in a significant way is attempting to find ways to help individuals, dyads, groups, families, and systems to become more fulfilled and better able to achieve their potential as humans in a manner that fits their values and worldviews. This general thrust can be made more precise in a series of statements as follows. Number one, each theory has to be looked at from the perspective of its historical origins and path into social work. Number two, each theory has to be looked at from the perspective of the strength of its empirical base. Number three, each theory has to be looked at from the perspective of its specificity or generalizability. Number four, each theory must address the nature of the individual and value assumptions about persons. Number five, each theory must develop a position on the nature and structure of personality, the determinants of personality, and the importance of power of rationality. Number six, each theory must develop a position on the nature of behavior, the nature of change, the determinants of change, and the differential importance of inner and outer influences on persons. Number seven, each theory must identify the characteristics of the helping process, including the kind, range, and nature of change agents. Number 8. Each theory needs to identify the spectrum of its applicability and its limitations. Number 9. Each system needs to specify the required knowledge and skills of the therapist. This profile, through its various drafts and reconceptualizations, has proven useful as a basis for comparing theories. As mentioned in the last edition, the then identified cluster of differentiating factors were used to develop a large chart which compared 21 theories along 33 variables subdivided under the 6 headings. Then identified this chart has proven to be useful for students, teachers, and colleagues. A modified version of this chart will be forthcoming in the near future. It is hoped that in so doing, we will be able to include more theories than before and to cover all of the above items. Some discussions have been held with several colleagues about a method of putting this chart into a computer program which will permit us to look for, among other things, a best fit between client and theory. I am planning to turn to this as a next project. Applications for practice. As the above comments indicate, I am comfortable that there is a high degree of consensus between and among the various theories and, more important, the theoreticians and the factors that combine to make up a practice theory. The differences emerge when we put specificity to each factor. If we accept this premise of a higher level of consensus among different thought systems than is usually considered, important questions are arise to be addressed related to the nature of practice from an interlocking theoretical perspective. Perhaps the most critical one is to what extent can and should a practitioner be knowledgeable about the comfortable with the range of systems here presented as well as others still to emerge. Several times in this chapter we have raised the question of how strongly practice is linked to theory and have taken the position that they are very strongly linked. But much of this is speculation. It would be cynical in the extreme to suggest that these theories have no influence on practice, but I think it will be equally naive to impede that practitioners consciously, deliberately, and consistently formulate their interventive strategies from a specific conceptual base. It is our strong conviction that all of the various theories are important that it is thus our responsibility to be aware of each, to strive to understand each, and to deliberately attempt to utilize aspects of each system in our practice when appropriate. I remain strongly committed to this thesis, yet I am aware of the challenge created by such an approach. Too long have we labored under an impression that adherence to one approach to practice by definition excluded others. That there was some component of disloyalty or some quality of Machiavellian manipulation to attempt to move from one approach to another depending on the situation, the setting, the resources, the persons, or the request. One could support this monotheory approach if it were held that the various theories are mutually exclusive and contradictory. This is much less true if one is committed to the concept of a large element of interconnectedness and inter-influences. I am frequently asked by students and practitioners if I really mean that we need to know all of the theories here described. I have pondered this at length and have concluded that the answer is a definite yes. We do not we do need to be acquainted with at least the basis parameters of each, and most important their potential to help and to hurt. In many aspects of our lives we deal with a high degree of diversity. We are able to absorb large amounts of information about many topics in our lives. So too with theories. It is possible to address this diversity in a knowing and responsible way. As mentioned above, since every theory does address the same questions, once we understand the profile of a theory and how it addresses these specifics, we can incorporate the profiles of many theories into our armamentarium of intervention resources. Colleagues in other disciplines deal with an even greater profile of diversity, so too can we. I am not suggesting that we need to be fully proficient in each system, but we do need to know the dimensions, potentials, and limitations of each. If not, as mentioned elsewhere, we may be depriving a client of access to a form of help that might be of a particular benefit because of a goodness of fit between the theory and the client. I have experimented with several approaches and presently am of the opinion that each new graduate should have as a minimum the following theoretical profile: one theory with a biopsychosocial base, one with a cognitive base, one with a short-term profile, and one with a crisis and stress-oriented basis. But most important, I believe it is essential that our students of today need to emerge with an understanding of theory, a comfort and respect for diversity, and a commitment to an interlocking and inter-influencing viewpoint. The way ahead. It is difficult to predict with certainty where we are going as a profession from the perspective of theoretical plurality. Clearly, we are beyond the point where we have to advocate for it. It is no longer a concept that appears to be off the wall. Rather, there is an appreciation of and wonderment regarding the immense yet exciting challenge that this reality presents. This turn is accompanied by an understanding and acceptance that to translate these convictions to evidenced material will be a long, slow process, but it is one that is worth the price. Undoubtedly, new theories will emerge, viewpoints, ideas from other parts of the world will enrich us. They will also trouble as long cheri- as long cherished beliefs and challenged. Throughout, we will continue to learn with wonderment and humility of the complexions and potential of the human family. There are many directions in which we can and ought to go. We began this volume with some help from Elise and end in the same value. Elise asked, "Would you tell me, please, which way I ought to go from here? That depends a good deal on where you want to get to," said the Cheshire Cat. Accumulation of practice, wisdom, and ethical commitment. However daunting the task, we ought not fear it. There is abundant evidence that what we do helps people. Clients are better off as a result of our interventions with them and our ability to help understand and alter their significant environments. But we need to do much more to make precise. A further question asked some years ago by Kendall and Butcher. What intervention conducted by what therapist? With what clients to resolve what psychosocial dysfunction produces what effects? As we have said, the answers to such challenges will not come from one or two breakthrough kinds of studies, but through a myriad of small, well-designed, carefully conducted projects that together in a step-by-step manner will help us to build this needed further body to tested knowledge. The comparison of theories. One of the premises of this work is that we should make much more effort than we have to date to use our various theories in a differential manner. That is, we need to enhance our efforts to match theory to client rather than theory to therapist. Since theory have differing value bases and alternative views of what constitutes helping, so too do clients. My view is that indeed these persons are theory rich, as is evidenced when they talk about a client. However, I believed their theory has become so intuitive to them that it is difficult for them to explicate it. As a researcher, I have to accept that they may be right and that my explanations may only be a rationalization to suit my being challenged in this way. I have thought about this and related questions and have speculated on the question of how one goes about testing either of these hypotheses as to whether the equality of outcome is related to soundness of theory or skill at empathy. This conundrum raises a series of potential questions for examination. What theories do persons say drive their practice? How much do persons know about the theories they say they use? That is, does one have to have a strong theory base, or is it enough to believe in one? Is it possible to observe differences in the practice of persons related to the theories they profess to use? If this is so, can we see differences in outcomes in cases where different theoretical bases are used? Of course, these are highly generic questions, each of which would lend itself to a multitude of diverse specific research projects. Until we begin to address the general question of what is the relationship of theory to practice, we need to humbly accept that we do not know and live with the reality that much of what we do in practice rests on the. In their view, what is needed for intervention to be effective is a highly responsive empathetic, understanding, consistent response to a client. They would say that they practice without theory and advise younger colleagues whom they supervise or teach to do the same. Would not be of such importance. But such data do not exist. It appears that the critical variables have not yet been identified. The reality of having some theories differentially in fashion over others means that some clients are deprived of various approaches to therapy based on reasons extraneous to the needs of the presenting situation. In this way, clients can be harmed. This makes the question one of ethics. A second research challenge facing us relates to the critical importance of theory in practice. As discussed in Chapter 1, as essential premise of this volume and one that is a major tenet of the profession is that responsible practice needs to be founded on sound theory. We have long proclaimed this and have always acted as if it were so. The task we now face is to demonstrate that this is true. I am particularly intrigued by this question because of discussions I have had in the last few years with several very senior colleagues in clinical practice who challenge me very pointedly on this issue. The persons to whom I refer are recognized by colleagues to be among the leaders in the field of practice but who differ strongly with me on the point of theory. They would argue that theory gets in the way of their practice and limits their spontaneity. Research challenges. As we continue down the path of increased diversity of theory accompanied by a demonstrated commitment to accountability, it is clear that increasing efforts need be and are going to be put into research just as we have welcomed the increasing comfort with plurality in theory and method. We can also observe a similar increasing comfort with diversity in research methodology. In the period of time between the last edition and this one, it has been gratifying to see that what appeared to be the emergence of another of our either are battles between the proponents of quantitative and qualitative research has passed. For the most part, researchers are comfortable with the concept that different research methods are strategies for advancing knowledge. Hence, all methods are of equal value once one becomes better than the other only in their appropriate application to meet the demands of the challenge at hand. From the perspective of theory and social work practice, there are a number of essential research challenges. One important component of this relates to the aforementioned question of fashion. This question of why some theories are more popular in the some parts of the profession and at different times and places is an interesting one. Apart from the sociological impact, the effect on practice of these undulating periods needs to be examined. Related to this is the concomitant question of why some systems have become mainstream and others remain on the periphery of practice. If there were evidence that this was related to specific utility, the quest of research that has been conducted to test our various aspects of a theory or the application of a theory to a particular setting, problem, or client group. What we still need, of course, is more work that focuses precisely on the differential use of theories in similar situations. That is, can we begin to demonstrate that there are different outcomes which different theories are used in similar situations? Interesting as such questions are from a conceptual perspective, of perhaps even more importance is the responsibility to continue to expand our knowledge as to when the use of a particular theory is counterindicated. Accompanying the earlier mentioned growing comfort with openness to change in theories is an expanded readiness to accept all to accept that all theories are not useful for all clients all of the time. The authors of the various chapters have addressed this question well. Often the comments about contraindications are speculate stemming from a rich experience with the particular theories used. What we need to do now is to expand our knowledge through rigorous testing with regard to when the use of particular systems are contraindicated. This is particularly important in view of the North American tendency to adulate fashion and thus have some theories in style over others at different times and in different situations. What is still to be done? As described above, we have indeed come far. However, just as certainly we have far to go in our quest for the optimal method of tapping the richness of this theoretical diversity for the good of our client. As I read and reread the spectrum of contributions, I noted some commonalities of areas where I think we need to continue to work as we move on in our theoretical odyssey. Clearly, in we have come far in incorporating a concept of a pluralistic methods approach to practice. All of the theories presented speak about their applications for work with individuals, families, and groups. This is critical as we work to move away from a concept of each practitioner needing to fly a particular methodological flag. However, there is still some unevenness in this, especially in two areas. The first of these relates to work with dyads, which is an important aspect of our practice. Whether such dyads be married couples, two siblings, a permanent relationship between a couple, two friends, two persons with a specific commonality, or indeed two strangers, this is an area of practice where underutilization appears to be the common picture. Furthermore, it is a topic only sparsely addressed in many of our methods books. A further methodological challenge for all theories relates to the macro components of practice, especially here in North America. We are still a long way from putting behind us the long-standing intrafamilial micro-macro tensions. This author has long hoped that as we become more comfortable with theoretical and methodological plurality, we will move toward a resolution of this division. As mentioned in Chapter 1, for a theory to be relevant to social work, it must speak to the person in situation, paradigm, and how change is brought about in each factor of this paradigm, including the situation. Thus, even the most individualistic therapy-based theory to including the situation. Thus, even the most individualistic theory-based theory to be truly a social work theory must understand and address the larger systems that impinge on the lives of our clients. This is relevant for systems and situations in themselves as well as in their potential to impact on individuals, dyads, families, and groups. Thus, each of our theories needs to examine its potential and relevance for community work. Interestingly, meditation, a system one would consider initially to be as far away from macro practice as is imaginable, does address the potential impacts of its methods on community life and social change. Existentialism also speaks to this component of practice. It is hoped that as we move forward in the task of boundary opening and crossing, more attention will be given to the application of all of our theories to large systems practice. As before, all of the articles in the volume were written by North Americans. Each addresses the extent to which it is applicable to a multicultural client much more than in earlier editions. Whether we have fully examined the extent to which each system has worldwide application needs to be left as an open question. As the profession becomes more and more worldwide with a commonality of values, knowledge and skills, much work. There is some beginning awareness that technology is an emerging societal variable that we need to begin to incorporate into our theoretical perspectives of practice. Clients are being influenced by this aspect of society in a myriad of ways. Certainly not all negative. Indeed, technology brings considerable information, satisfaction, community awareness, entertainment, and learning to society. We need to do two things here. First, to develop more interest and sensitivity to the various aspects of these impacts on clients, and second, to examine in greater detail the extent to which technology can be used as adjuncts in intervention. Another aspect of theoretical differences relates to the possible relationship between the nature of a service setting and the socio-political climate in which it finds itself and the influence of these on the theoretical orientation of practitioners. For example, it may be that in times of economic restraint and strongly held negative reactions by large segments of society to social needs, that theories which stress clients' accountability and autonomy will be prevalent. Certainly, we in North America are in the mindset of a period where short-term problem solving is the administrative fashionable mode. Although this may not be what is best for all clients, it is gratifying to note the extent to which the research base of most of our theories has expanded. All of the bibliographies are much richer than before, not only from the perspective of being updated since the last edition, but also reflecting the amount of need to be done in examining the relative efficacy of each system in relation to the culture in which it is practiced. To date, to date the book has had a rather large international impact. In a future edition, it will be hoped that a more international authorship will be sought to begin to reflect more pointedly the general application or lack thereof of different theories. Two areas identified previously in the third edition still require both attention and further work. The first relates to the question of the role of technology in treatment, although it is not as yet a strong theme in the literature. Undoubtedly, there are differences in the weighting of the various components of the client's reality within and among the spectrum of theories. As well, there are differences in perception about the potential for change of individuals and groups. But again, there is more consensus than disagreement on the importance of the components of the significant environments and their intermixture. An inherent theme here is to view the client more as an equal, a fellow human being in search for meaning rather than as an interesting object of study. The lessening of the need to preach and attempt to win converts. This has been supplanted by a growing comfort with exploration and experimentation, resulting in changes and modifications of systems as data emerge, along with an expanded commitment to research is an enriched purview of the parameters and techniques of research. Throughout, however, there is an emphasis of the client's current reality, the inherent thrust to growth, health and strength, to the ability to reason, to take responsibility, to change both self and situation, to adjust, to plan reflectively on both our present and future life, and to accountable within the realities in which we live. This theme is not a one that holds that a client can change all aspects of his reality. The crushing impact of poverty, racism, political oppression, and lack of the basic necessities of life is understood and decried. But within there is a theme that is less pessimistic than before of the extent to which change can take place. Much of this growing comfort with the dynamic growth and development of theories and a move away from cultism and dogmatism has resulted from the expansion of the research base of each system. As more research on various uses and outcomes of such use for each theory is carried out and the predominance of findings continues to support the effectiveness of each system in various situations. On the other side, an excellent example of the development of a theory and its incorporation of new material can be observed in the discussion regarding crisis theory by Dr. L. Here we see the movement from the important but narrow view of crisis to the incorporation of concepts such as critical stress reactions and post-traumatic stress reactions. Pathology as the primary target of intervention can be noted. Instead, we are observing a thrust to build our diagnosis and plan our treatment on the client's goals and aspirations within the parameters of their strengths and available resources. In so doing, increased understanding and attention is given to the client's social reality and his her or their perception of it within the broad base with which it is composed. Pathology is not denied or excluded from the purview of the social worker clinician but is seen in a much more comprehensive way, so that when present it must be viewed in context and as only one part of the client's reality with which we deal. Although not as predominant a development as expected with the increasing permeability between theoretical systems and their applications, the need for an expanded understanding of the physical and biological components of our client's reality is emerging. This growing awareness of the effects of our biological reality on our psychosocial functioning increases our responsibility to give these aspects of our clients more attention. Gestalt and its awareness of the way our body and its function and its functioning can convey messages about our psychological status, meditation's interest in body and mind connections, and neuro-linguistics focus on understanding the neurological base of communication have helped bring into clearer focus the relevance of this material to our practice, as has the chapter on transpersonal social work. In the last edition, it was pointed out that there was a broadening of perception as to the relative importance of the unconscious in practice. This still remains with a generalized acceptance that there is an unconscious component to all personality structure regardless of theory. The differences between theories being in the importance that it is given. However, we have now moved beyond this to an expanded perception of what is meant by the unconscious and how it manifested. Some of the discussion in the use of meditation and cognitive thinking has contributed to this. Another example of expanded and enriched perception relates to the situation segment of person in situation. Here we are continuing to progress in our awareness of both the complexity and importance of understanding our clients' social reality. In so doing, we are developing approaches that make use of this expanded awareness in a therapeutic manner. Another concept where there has been considerable broadening and enrichment is in regard to the expanded concept of the helping relationship. This awareness relates to a richer understanding of such things as power transference and values as components of the relationship between clients and workers, but as well of the growing appreciation of the diversity of forms that this relationship can take. Within these chapters, a diminution in the focus on further as alluded to above, there has been a marked shift to a much greater incorporation of the concept of interlocking and inter-influencing. Virtually all of the chapters indicate areas in which there are connections and, and commonalities with other systems to a much greater extent than in an earlier day. As part of this, the range of writing about various theories and the place of theory in practice has expanded. This reflects a growing interest in the differential application of theories as well as an expanding commitment to explore the specific applications of each theory through either practice or more formal research. As noted, one of the advantages are rather Weinfeld's of a familiarity and comfort with an interlocking perspective is the contribution that this makes to the expansion of concepts once thought to be precise in definition and reification. The question of unconscious is a good example.